Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversants are Erin Friday and Jonathan Zacherson, who have filed 3 initiatives in California which force schools to be transparent about a child's gender identity, to protect girls' sports and spaces, and to protect children from reproductive harm. In this conversation, we talk about their initiatives and why they are doing it in this manner, and what they are up against with regards to the California state's desire to transition children without their parents' knowledge and even from other states. This is front lines stuff. Erin and Jonathan are wonderful people, and if you do want to support them in their endeavors, links will be in the description. Without further ado, here is Jonathan Zacherson and Erin Friday. And what's your story, Jonathan? I don't know hide nor hair about you.
So I guess I was kind of just quiet behind the scenes, just focused on, what most people worry about, just, the kid's career and all that stuff. And then COVID hit, right? Or mostly the lockdowns hit. And I thought that was ridiculous. And so my kids did go to the Roseville Joint High School. Well, one went to the middle school. And so I just, this is absurd. So I just tried finding out, who the school board was, why are they shutting this down? And then, kind of learn it was coming from the governor, after, back and forth with a few folks. So in June of 2020, I founded Reopen California Schools, focused just on trying to some advocacy, thinking, we hold a few rallies, we write a few letters, that'll do the trick. And nope, I was a little naive at the time. But led to one thing led to another. More people got involved. People sued the governor. I participated in suing the governor to get masks off kids and some of the other COVID mandates. And then we have this issue. And so just with the advocacy just kind of building on itself and just working with various folks, like getting to meet Erin and her advocacy, joining forces on this important issue. So it's kind of a quick summary of where I've come from on this topic.
Yeah. What's the overlap between the no masking kind of anti-lockdown folks and the let's not cut off kids' genitals and model their secondary sex characteristics according to some sort of made up ideology that came out of nowhere 10 years ago groups? Like, where is there a lot of overlap? Or
are you setting this up? It sounds like
no.
Setting the answer up, Benjamin.
Well, I'm wondering, it's just interesting because you're a political group, so there's got to be people who, it's 2 different issues, right? And it's 2 kind of different concerns, but maybe it's not. Maybe they really do dovetail. And the same people who see problems with this top-down authoritarian control through COVID mandates see something similar with the gender things, at least how it's going through the system, being promoted by the system.
Yeah, I mean, I can share my perspective, and Erin might have a different one coming from a different angle. But, as I went through this various aspects, right, we had school reopening and school closures. Then we had the mask issue, vaccine mandate issue, actually, and then the mask issue. And I would say that at each step of the way, there was different people who kind of came on to the advocacy and who fell off. But I would say by and large, it was, the same players, at least the more vocal players and the ones that were most effective kind of stuck around in that. And then when it comes to this, I think it's a little bit more broad, right? And then I'd even say that there's some people that were against the lockdowns, against the mask mandates, but then, may actually still feel like, wait a minute, they may take a different position. At least that's what I've seen in our we had a Facebook group that every time that a new issue changes, you get, people who are like, I'm leaving this group, or a bunch of new people join the group for that cause. So it really depends. And I think it depends on if you have kids currently in school, where you were, if you have grandkids, just kind of what your background is on this issue. So Erin, I'm sure she has a different,
I have a totally, yeah. Well, my perspective came from the, liberal Democrat side, because that's what I was. And so I was the rule follower and looking at people who were anti as kooks. Why aren't you listening to our government? They say this is going to end the pandemic. Just get the darn. That's how I was looking at all of this, which changed dramatically once I entered into the gender milieu and realized that our government had been lying to us for a long time. And it was a really, besides the thing I went through with my daughter, I mean, I went through this whole new enlightenment, so to speak. I had believed everything that the New York Times had written. I had believed everything. NPR, I listened to the Daily every morning. That was my morning routine and walk. And then I realized they're pulling the wool over our heads left and right. And I used to kind of not snub, but I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about. And quickly learned the crossover. And so me personally, I wouldn't have gotten the knowing what I know now. And I reached out to all the groups because I saw what they did, and they were all grassroots, and I wanted to, make coalitions with them because they stopped the mandated, and I wanted to know how they did that. How did a bunch of parents stop one of the most liberal, the most liberal legislature in the country from, trampling on parental rights? So this is what it's all about, too, right? It's trampling on parental rights. It's giving adult decisions to a child. I mean, the crossover is direct. We're letting children dictate their own medical interventions. We're telling parents to be led by a child. I mean, it's all interrelated. And then kind of understanding that the government didn't have our best interest. They don't care about our school students. They don't care about kids. So that's how.
So is one of the linchpins so you guys filed 3 motions. I'm always bad with the legal speak, and I know what the words really matter, but you guys just filed 3 motions or
3 initiatives.
Initiatives.
Yes.
So initiatives is something that the public has to sign on to?
Yeah, I think maybe it's worthwhile to probably go through because each state is different. This isn't available in every state, but in California, thankfully, voters have an option that if the legislature isn't taking action, or they don't feel the legislature is taking appropriate action, we have the ability to essentially go straight to the people. So we can submit the bill language with a bunch of declarations and some provisions to the Attorney General. It goes through a review process to get a title and summary, and as well as a fiscal analysis, just like other bills might. And after that time period, we then have 6 months to collect a certain number of signatures. In this case, it's just under 550,000 valid signatures per initiative. If you do that within the time frame, then you can have those issues directly on the ballot so people can vote for them. And that's what we're trying to do here, is take these initiatives that we filed, get the appropriate number of signatures, and then have the voters be able to vote directly on these.
Okay. And is parental rights so-called one of the linchpins of what you're forwarding? I mean, I bring that up for a variety of reasons to actually delve into the content of this episode, but also to kind of understand legally speaking, or if that is kind of like the groundwork upon which what you guys are trying to forward leans upon.
Well, one is definitely parental rights. The first initiative is dealing with the ability of schools to keep secrets from parents and lie to parents about their child, struggling with gender. So the first one is all about parental rights and whether schools have the right to parent kids or parents do. So it's a huge issue that will probably have to be decided ultimately by the Supreme Court, since across the nation, schools are basically acting as parents, and these are violations of the 14th Amendment, under the Constitution. So
what
the
did
first
Biden
one,
say? They're our kids. They're not your
yeah,
kids. They're our kids. Yeah.
right. And that's how they're behaving. Really, there's a sweet spot age here in California, which is 12. Parents get to be parents until their child is 12. 12 was the failed mandate to give the kids the jab without parental notice. 12 is the age when children can get mental health without consent of their parents or knowledge. 12 is when kids can get an abortion without their parents' knowledge. 12 is when they can get medical health without their parents knowing. Like 12 is now the new 18.
Okay.
And they're moving, 12, there's a bill in California that 12-year-olds can emancipate.
But I'd add that for this particular issue, the way the guidance is written in many coming from the California Department of Education, there is no age. Essentially a kindergartner can make this assertion, and the schools can not only not notify the parents, but can keep it a secret from the parents. So I mean, this is completely absent in any law. It's just administrators came up with an FAQ for this issue.
Really? Okay.
And so I would contend that it's illegal to be keeping the secrets, and the only part that you could argue that schools may not have to do is the notification side. Right today, and so we have a huge problem and disconnect between I think what is allowed and versus not allowed, and ultimately we don't have time for the courts to figure this out. We need to add clarity and add it directly to statute, which is why we want to introduce this initiative.
Okay. So is their side from the point of view of safety, like they want to keep the child safe?
Yeah,
parents?
Can I read a quote from our Attorney General in California? This is a quote from the lawsuit that he just filed. He said that transgender and gender nonconforming students are in danger of imminent, irreparable harm from the consequences of forced disclosure. Now, the forced disclosure, is to the parents. So what he is saying is that gender confused kids are in danger from their own parents for imminent and irreparable harm. So he is essentially saying every parent is a dangerous human. And we need to protect these kids from their own parents. With, of course, no backing of any of this.
That's a declaration of war on parents.
It absolutely is.
He's basically saying the parents are a threat to citizens.
Well, we already have Department of Justices at the federal level saying that, right?
Yeah, for the school board meetings, if you show up, you're a white supremacist or some sort of like rabble rouser, enemy of the state. Okay.
Yep.
Following a civil rights investigation into the legality of Chino Valley Unified School District's mandatory gender identity disclosure policy, we have determined the following: that the policy discriminates against transgender and gender nonconforming students, that it violates their constitutional rights and violates their civil rights, that it has already harmed and continues to threaten their mental, emotional, and physical well-being. As a result, we filed a lawsuit today to immediately stop its enforcement. This policy has managed to violate multiple constitutional rights of our students, multiple statutory rights of our students, their right to privacy, their right to equal protection, their right to be free from discrimination. It tramples on students' rights. It presents students with a terrible choice. Either walk back your rights to gender identity and gender expression, to be yourself, to be who you are, or face the risk of serious harm. For far too many, transgender and gender nonconforming youth, school serves as their only safe haven, a place away from home where they can find validation, safety, privacy. We have to protect that. We have to ensure our schools are sanctuaries for every single student. We We have to fight those who would try to rip that away from them. I hope today's action makes it abundantly clear that we will and we are.
And this is why the initiative is so important. And this is also why the initiative has, the polling shows 75%, or about that, or 74% of Californians, regardless of party affiliation, would vote yes to involving the parents
Forced
in the
disclosure.
Yeah. Forced disclosure.
Yeah.
And let's just talk about that phraseology for 1 second. Forced disclosure. The child is saying they're transgender at school. So everyone at school knows. The teacher, the janitor, the substitute teacher, the lunchroom lady.
The parental volunteers.
Everyone
every
knows.
Student.
The only person who doesn't know are those harmful, bigoted parents, the ones who are going to kill their children if they come out. I mean, the absurdity of this is beyond the pale. And I work with thousands of parents of gender confused kids. I know not one who has thrown their child out because they are struggling with gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
Not one.
Yeah.
So it's a lie.
And so rather than, I guess, suing him or holding him to account, you guys are just cutting to the chase and we're going to make this a part of law. Like, we're going to just codify this openly, that this is what we're going to do, as opposed to their side is just kind of a creeping kind of, we take the parents, advantage of the parents more and more through these kind of best practices kind of things.
Well, we tried a bill. We wrote the initiative was a bill that was presented to the legislature this year. Same type of language. Let the parents in on the secret. That's it. Let them in, and don't socially transition our kids without parental consent. And that bill didn't even get a hearing. So we tried to do it the traditional way, and we got the big middle finger. And so we're circumventing them and going to the people.
Okay.
And I'd add a little bit of a background on this. So there's a bill, AB 1266, which was passed in 2013, dubbed the bathroom bill. And this is very basic. It just says that children in school must be allowed to use facilities and participate in sports programs that align with their gender identity, even if it's different from their sex. That's essentially what that had. From that bill, the California Department of Education came up with this FAQ describing how do you implement this bill. And out of nowhere, they came up with this idea that students only have the ability to disclose this information, and that the parents, you have to keep it a secret from the parents if the child doesn't want to. In fact, they actually advise keeping it a secret from the parents in this FAQ. Now, this didn't follow any kind of administrative guidelines. The California Department of Education has admitted this is just a guideline. It's not law. It's not enforceable. But because they did that, there's this institutional structure, I guess, set up for a lot of school districts where all of their policies come from essentially one group, and that's the California School Board Association. They pay dues, they write and draft all of their policies, and then they send them back to the school districts, generally get rubber stamped. And they're supposed to review updated laws and procedures and all these things that happen. So the California School Board Association wrote an administrative regulation, 5145.3, that every school district pretty much blindly adopted, that essentially takes that FAQ stance and puts it into school policy. So now we have almost every school across the state in California has this policy. That was the basis for part of the basis for the Spreckles lawsuit that was recently settled. That was the basis for the Chico lawsuit as well, where parents are suing the schools for keeping it a secret, and they're pointing it to administrative regulation. There's some confusion as a law versus not law, but that's the basis. So these lawsuits started coming up, and that's, I think, when this need for that bill AB 1314 that Erin was talking about came up. Right? Didn't get a hearing, and so the next step was, okay, well, school districts will just notify themselves. There's nothing that says they can't do that. So Chino Valley passed that resolution, or passed a policy kind of undoing that, and says, no, we're not going to keep secrets from parents. We're going to notify them in these situations. and more school districts followed, and more school districts will continue to follow. But then we have the Attorney General basically targeting Chino Valley for their stance. And at the same time, we're then taking this exact policy to the people. So kind of there's a lot of things happening in parallel, but we know that the Attorney General was going to fight this. We knew that the Attorney General wasn't just going to let this happen. And so it's important that as the Attorney General continues to fight, and some of the more radical politicians in California continue to fight parental notification and parental rights, we had to start taking action. We couldn't wait.
So the stance of the state is that the kids belong to the state? Just generally speaking, is that like the advance, like this is just how they're behaving as though the kids belong to them?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that children are not safe with their parents unless the parent will agree to cut off their breasts or, cut off their genitals. And we see that we've got about 14, 15 bills that are making their way to Governor Newsom's desk that concretize that belief system that parents either transition their kids or lose them. And that's the state we're in. We're going to be the first state in the nation. Well, actually, I think Washington's got a pretty nasty one, but we'll be the first state in the nation that will do the opposite of what they did in Texas or tried to do in Texas. Is parents will be deemed abusive if we don't abuse our children by taking off their body parts. And that's where we're going in a very fast way. And the only way to stop this, the only way to return California to be the golden state is if the voters take it upon themselves to pass rational laws. And that's where the initiative process is so powerful. And it's our last tool in the toolbox besides lawsuits, which take too long. They take too long.
And cost almost as much money at the end of the day. So.
Yeah. And I've been in this a long time now, and I deal with the families directly. I deal with the parents who show up at graduation and they hear a name called out for their son that is not their son's name. And the parents can do nothing about it. They know that their children are being called different names and socially transitioned at school. They know that the schools are giving them breast compression binders and tape. And we need to end this because the schools are the faucet. They are the creators of these gender confused kids. Make no mistake, it starts at school. And, parents know this. They're pulling their kids out of public school left and right. Yeah. We have the lowest enrollment in 10 years in California.
Really?
It continues. But, there are parents who have to use public school for education. California is an expensive place to live.
Which I think, if you look at the name of this first initiative, the School Transparency and Partnership Act, I think is very appropriate, because one of the intents of this is to rebuild that trust, so that parents can know that they send their kids to schools, that they're going to be partnerships and transparent with everything that's happening to help their kids. And they're not going to be the parents, but they're just there as to educate and to work with families on making sure the best education outcomes for kids.
Is the state doing anything to disincentivize parents taking their children out? Do you guys see any movements that it's making to make homeschool illegal? That's kind of extreme.
I mean, the fact that you have no financial resources, or very little, depending on which way you go, and that you have to give up potentially work or taking care of other kids, is a huge opportunity cost. So I don't think you even have to go down the route of making it illegal, but just the fact that it's just so much work. You have to be a lot more involved, and so in that aspect, and you have to be a good teacher too, right? To kind of figure that out. So I think the opportunity cost alone, and frankly, I don't think that's enough at this point that they're worrying about.
Okay, so I'm just thinking of vectors of attack, because this is kind of a battle in a way, and they have a lot of incentives to get what they want to do, and you guys have a lot of parents have a lot of incentives to get what they want out of the thing. And so what kind of are the vectors of pressure that you can put on the system? And one thing that you guys are doing is this initiative route. Do you guys trust the system? I mean, like the legal system? Do you trust the levers of accountability?
No.
Or are you black-pilled in that respect?
No, I trust no one. I only trust what I read. No, I'm a jaded human being. We're going to have to get close to double the number of signatures. But what I do trust, and here's the power behind these initiatives and these bills, and the fact that we're now on the offense, which is the first time in California, we are on the offense. We've been playing this really bad game of defense. You can't win the game if you're only playing defense. But parents are waking up, and the Democratic base is starting to fall away. So we are seeing immigrant groups that are moving away because they now understand that their children are being overly sexualized at school, are being force-fed this transgender ideology, and they're joining forces. And what the Democratic Party failed to take notice of is that there are unlikely pairings. So there are people like me, Democrat for life, who are holding hands with the reddest of red people. There are lesbian groups standing out with evangelical groups. There's Blexit, which is Black people leaving Democratic Party. There's Lexit, Latinos leaving the Democratic Party. There are gays against groomers. There are lesbian groups. We're all holding hands now.
Okay.
The Chinese, which is a huge voting bloc in California, they are coming on board. The Indians, East Indians, and the Armenians, the Muslims, they poked the bear. Parents don't care about party when you're attacking their children. They will follow the issue. And so it's going to be a big awakening. I know everybody was expecting the red wave in 2022, but 2024, look, we figured it out what they were doing. Tie gender to abortion. Nobody's falling for it anymore. We have abortion up till the day the baby's going to be born. What else are they going to add to it? How are they going to trick the feminists to vote Democratic? They can't. It's game over. And you don't mess with the parents.
Yeah.
We lay down our lives for our kids. And our other initiatives are equally strong. I mean, they're reality. Boys are different than girls. Male body.
Are you talking like sports, like the other initiative is about segregation, sex segregation, or of some sort? Yeah.
Yep.
And so how is that particularly being targeted? They built this anti-segregation kind of civil rights thing, right? Following through civil rights.
What's so interesting, so this one actually has, I feel like, the hardest or maybe the least resistance, because it's just interesting. But the way that they attack it is they say they want to, which is actually not even completely true. They say this bill would ban trans girls from playing sports, right? That's what they're trying to say. It's like, well, first off, how do you define trans girl or trans woman? Right. Part of that definition requires recognizing that they were, biologically male. And so really that's the premise, is that we recognize that males, biological males, have a unfair competitive advantage against women when they're playing sports. And so that's all this is just saying, hey, you can't compete against girls, for the purpose of for fairness for girls, right? That's what we call it, the Protect Girls Sports and Spaces Act.
Okay.
But it's really difficult. Even Gavin Newsom, who was asked this question by Alex Michelson on his show, when the polling data came out that showed the vast majority of Americans including the majority of Californians and a plurality of Democrats, basically are in opposition to biological boys playing against girls. Newsom couldn't even answer the question. And he danced around it for about 2 minutes until he said, we just got to talk about this from a place of compassion, right? That's all how he can answer it. So I think it's difficult to
compassion for whom? The girls?
I think compassion for the people involved, right?
Yeah.
The idea that for the trans kids essentially is I think what he was alluding to, that we have to come out from a place of compassion, and the goal isn't to target anybody, right? I think that's what they're trying to do, is we're targeting this or targeting that. This is about protecting our girls who play sports, right? I have a daughter who played softball. As soon as we introduce, especially once we hit that age of puberty, it's there's a reason why we have different sports, and there's a reason why Title IX came about. And so to kind of pretend like that doesn't exist is really, I think, in some ways, is hurting the other side's movement, right? Is they have to pretend that anyone who's transgender is 100% way that the gender they're perceiving it in always, right, and has to pretend that the biology doesn't matter and all this other stuff doesn't matter. And I think them going to that direction, to that level, is basically to realize the fallacies and the problems with some of these policies.
But why take that particular issue through the initiative route? Did you guys try to do the bill thing? Did that get any hearing? Is that like the other?
Well, no, you're right. We didn't try to repeal AB 1266. So that's kind of what we spoke, right? There's a bill that actually in California requires students to play on teams that are opposite their biological sex if they identify that way. So the bill is very simple. It just repeals that aspect and then adds affirmative language to make it clear what the intent is, and that it's to protect girls' sports and spaces, and that it's okay for districts that if you have sex segregated facilities like a boys' locker room or a girls' locker room, if you have those, they're going to be based off biological sex, right? They're not going to be based off other reasons. Like, we don't have a gender identifying segregated bathroom. We have a sex segregated bathroom. Right. And so and that's just making that clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the third initiative?
Yeah. So that's Protect Children from Reproductive Harm Act.
Oh.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's big. We're going big.
I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, these procedures, and this is basically would prohibit puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, genital surgeries, mastectomies, anything around that would have a likelihood of an impacting a child's reproductive health as they mature into adults would be prohibited for minors. It's pretty basic, right? We shouldn't be letting kids convincing kids that they somehow can, by going on with these procedures as minors, that that will sterilize them, is going to solve a problem that can't potentially be solved maybe down the road as they get older. Okay. So that's really the basis of this. Too young for kids to be doing this. Parents are given false choices in this process. Kind of as Erin talked about with other bills, you either do this or you lose custody in many cases. Or you're being told you do this or your child is going to commit suicide. And we need to put the brakes on this because it's growing and getting larger in numbers in California. In fact, California has become a trafficking state for this kind of stuff, where kids are being trafficked to California to get these procedures. And
that you're not understating the case. Like, California codified that they will trans your kid if you bring. It's a sanctuary. It's a eugenic sanctuary. You can go there and get sterilized or sterilize your child.
Yes, yes. And it's worse than that. It's worse because what the bill, I think you're talking about SB 107 that passed last year, Scott Wiener was the author of it. That bill, what it did is it permits children. I mean, we have to emphasize this. This is children.
No age limit.
To run away to the state of California. Once they run away here, the way the law worked prior to last year, if a child ran away from another state and landed in California, California's response would be to send the child back to the state where the child lives, unless the parents were deemed physically abusive to this child. Otherwise, the child gets sent back, and the home state deals with the issues going on with the child. This law permits the child, once they step foot on California soil, California judges take jurisdiction. That means they are now in charge of what happens to that child. Well, we know how the family court judges here are being trained. They are being trained by trans activists. Asev Orr is one of their main trainers. He wrote Schools in Transition, which is the School Secrets tome. And anyway, so once the kid's here, it's game over for those parents in Kansas. They're not going to get that child back. That child back is now going to become a ward of California. And in California, foster care kids, guess what they get to do when they're 12? Yeah. They get to decide what gender interventions they want, and our tax dollars are spent. So that's one thing that they get to do. We are also trans sanctuary state if there is a dispute between mom and dad. So let's say mom and dad are divorced. Dad doesn't even have custody of the child. No rights, whatever, to the child. He can kidnap that child, come to California, and find safety. The California judges, again, will then decide what to do with dad and the child. They basically rip up the order from the other state. It has no bearing anymore. California has become its own country.
Yeah, and to clarify on that, that's specific for if the purpose of coming to California is to get gender affirming care or gender affirming mental health care. So if you're coming here because you just because I don't like my mom, then they'll work with you. But if it's like, oh, I'm coming here because my mom's not letting me take puberty blockers, or because my mom doesn't agree with my gender identity necessarily, at that point, then they won't work with the parents and won't work with local officials, and they prohibit law enforcement, they prohibit the courts, they prohibit anybody in California government from working with other jurisdictions outside of California.
Wow. That just seems like something that violates, that's like kind of shot across the bow of civil war. I mean, states going after other states.
Full faith and credit, it violates. There's a lawsuit that's been filed against that law in particular. But, really all the attorney generals in all the other 49 states should be filing a lawsuit against California because they're basically saying the judge's orders in those 49 states have no bearing in California. We are our own country. We are now a state of transgenderism. We need a new name for California, and we can, if these initiatives pass, if this third initiative passes, that SB 107, that bill disappears. We unwind so many bad bills if we get these initiatives passed.
Okay, so that third initiative basically makes it, what does it do? Does it make it illegal in California for children to access transgender care?
It prohibits the providers from providing those things for the purposes of relating to gender disorder issues.
For minors, so minors, 18 and under.
Minors.
So
under
basically
18, under 18.
Nobody, no medical provider, Planned Parenthood, insurance companies, nobody can actually do that. Does the state have the power to enforce that? And will it, if it gets, this is really skeptical, if that passes, would the state even enforce it? Could they just not enforce that? Could they just ignore it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't go as far as, say, like Texas. So like Texas and Florida and some of these other states had these bills. And again, this gets really long, and they try to think of every scenario of which, how do you combat this? Yeah. We were a little bit more pragmatic in our approach, which is focused on it just prohibits the provider and basically subject to discipline from the provider. So we know that the agency, which is not, it is created under, obviously the government code creates this, and but they don't necessarily manage it. And so it is separate entities, the licensing entities and the medical board would essentially have to discipline them. And as soon as you make this illegal, it allows then at that point for insurance companies to no longer cover it. Right? They can't be covering things that are illegal. And so it does put a big stop to that and disincentivizes a lot of the travel to come here. Because now California, you can't get that. So instead of coming to California, I suppose you would go to Washington or maybe another state, but not California. So there is, there's a lot of things that can be done after the fact. And we do instruct the legislature in the initiative to kind of clean up existing code that are in conflict with the law. We don't directly repeal provisions of SB 107. Otherwise, the initiative would be, one, it'd be like 20 pages, but two, there are other aspects of SB 107 that necessarily aren't applicable to this bill. So we don't want to just do a full repeal. And so it does take those steps. I think it's enough ultimately to pause it. No provider is going to want to provide these if they're going to lose their license. No insurance company is going to insure it if it's illegal.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking of hospitals with gender clinics, so specifically children's hospitals with gender clinics. Would they just shutter those things? I mean, I'm just
they would have to.
scenarios.
They would have to move to the adult side, right? They would eliminate the pediatric side.
Okay. Wow.
Well, we only took away the medical interventions, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries, the mental health aspect, which we know is lacking anyway. We know the gender clinics aren't doing any of that anyway. But we did not tackle that in this initiative. But
would schools still be able to socially transition children with, I guess, just not without parents' knowledge, right? I mean, you could still see it's not making it illegal for schools to trans kids.
Well, yeah, I think if there's different initiatives, right? So going back to that first initiative, the School Transparency and Partnership Act, if that passes, yes, these kids would still be able to socially transition at school. However, one, you have to notify the parents if the request is made, and two, it requires the parents to be involved in that decision-making process over what exactly that looks like, right? So the parents know the children better. So if they don't agree to certain aspects of it, then the school wouldn't be able to participate in some of those aspects.
And then in the second initiative, the school would not be able to social transition a kid up to and including bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports. So social transition would just be an aesthetic. It would be contained as an aesthetic. I have a new name and I have different pronouns and I dress a different way, but you can't actually go and dominate. Let's say if you're a boy, dominate girls' sports or get entry into their private spaces, right?
Correct.
So it restrains whatever this transition thing is. And then the third initiative halts the medical side, the medicalization of this transgender ideology. So it's kind of like putting it into a box and maybe containing it so it could maybe in one certain timeline just kind of fade out into some sort of cringy thing that we were all thinking about in the 2020s, right?
Well, I think to make it completely fade out is we have to get it out of the curriculum at school. And because that's where the seed is planted. It's planted in kindergarten and in TK when they're reading those nice picture books that, a doctor could have made a mistake. The Jazz Jennings book, the red crayon, or is it blue crayon? Forget what color. But they read these, little books to these kids, and these kids are immediately indoctrinated into believing that they can opt out of their sex. And that seed is planted, and it can grow at any time when their life is distressful, as we see with the rapid onset gender dysphoric kids going through puberty and, COVID lockdowns. They're lonely. That seed then starts to sprout. So to really end this moment in history, this horrific place where we find ourselves, we actually have to get it out of the curriculum and stop teaching this as fact. It's a belief system. It's a new religion. It is not based on any scientific evidence whatsoever. And I think that's actually a realm that we'll have to attack legally. I really do believe that we could win these cases on a religious issue.
I would say I think it's more pervasive than just schools, but schools are obviously a big part of that. Social media and just the fact that people are celebrated for this, and really when you look at just who has a hold on education in California, it is some of them. CTA, for example, they held some of the more extreme views within the base of the Democrat Party, and so that's why we're seeing it there. Is they're going to continue to push whatever that issue is. So I think to your point, if these issues win from a state level and from a national level, it really, I believe it's going to change the conversation, and that Democrats are going to realize these are big time losing issues, and we need to move away from this. And instead of now, the party and the Democrat Party, those in power in the Democrat Party pushing this, they're going to move away from it. We can get back to more normal, sane conversation about these issues. And then the schools hopefully will start, moving away from it. Certain people in social media will no longer be celebrated to the level that they are, and being told and shown videos in front of kids, because that's happening too at schools. And so hopefully it changes the whole conversation, and that Democrats can kind of move back to the middle on this issue to just have sane conversations.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any, is it going overboard to assume that there is some sort of grooming going on? Do you guys even, do you, I guess, avoid even that rhetoric? But because you were bringing up the age 12, like kids get to access all this stuff. Is there also stuff in California with the age of consent being lowered like that? Is there like this, is that a part of this stuff as so far as you guys have seen, or is that kind of like the scare tactic rhetoric that's just not relevant?
It's not a scare tactic. We haven't actually seen that move yet, but it's definitely on its way. I suspect in the next couple of years we will see the move to 12. Because here's how the argument goes: if a child can decide their medical interventions at 12, if they can decide their mental health at 12, if they can emancipate at 12, if they can do all these things at 12, well, why can't they consent at 12? And that's how the argument's going to go. They haven't done that yet, but we see the movement in that direction with the types of books that are available to students in their schools. We talk a lot about a book called I Am Gay, or This Book is Gay, and this is found in sixth graders' library, in California. And this book tells sixth graders how to find a lover online, and how to find a stranger and meet up with a stranger, and then what to do when you see that stranger. So the dividing line of what was age-appropriate sexual talk, there is none anymore. We have schools that are promoting drag queen events, but they've taken it even one step further. They're having the students be the drag queens, the 12-year-olds, and they don't need parental permission for this. They only need a trusted adult, which could be a senior in high school, an 18-year-old, or just some random person. And they're having the kids do the dancing. So we are rapidly moving towards just a debauchery.
And the Spreckles lawsuit and the Chino lawsuit, there was some of that essentially. I mean, these kids, and I don't know the age of the child in Spreckles. I believe she was under 12, but I know Chico was under 12. And part of that, the accusations, essentially that's what the teachers and counselors were doing. Is they were essentially finding kids that might be a little different or maybe not have friends, and basically tell them, oh, the reason you're different, or the reason that this might be happening in your life is because you're probably the opposite gender. And they convince them. It isn't just more passive where they kind of teach kids at a young age about this, and then the kid maybe sees something online or reads a book and then comes out to the teacher. They were actively telling kids that they might be the wrong gender, and then promoting that and pushing it throughout the school so that they identify that way at school, and then keeping it a secret from parents. So yeah, we do see instances of that, and if that's not grooming, I don't know, what is. In that scenario. Now, I'm not saying that's the norm, but it does happen, and it will continue to happen if we don't go to this place where we involve parents.
Yeah, I mean, if parents aren't, if the school somehow, whatever that entity is protecting the children from the parents, then what can go on is anybody's guess. Like, there's no limit to what the janitor can the counselors most likely are transing these kids, convincing these kids are going along with this thing, along with the social media, along with it just being kind of in the air, but then the counselors get a hold of it. And this is essentially about a kid's sexuality, right? And the kid's sexuality, like, it's all protected and stuff. So what can go on behind that curtain is anybody's guess. Like, the amount of abuse there's no end to it. We've seen kids get talked into this gender stuff and then run away from home and end up trafficked because the schools side with confusing them about their gender, confusing them about their biology, and then making them incredibly vulnerable to being abducted or getting, just completely sucked away from their guardian.
And it's by design, right? So you have teachers, the second most important group of adults in a child's life. Students tend to believe their teachers. We as parents, we always had our kids come home and say, well, Mrs. Smith said this. Of course, they believe what Mrs. Smith says because that's their teacher. And these teachers are telling these kids that it's okay to keep secrets from mom and dad. Now, how is a child supposed to distinguish when a secret should be kept and a secret shouldn't be kept? Which secret is, so if you have even a third party out there who is molesting the child and saying to the child, keep this our secret. Well, they've been taught by their teachers that it's okay to keep a secret from their parents. And then as we move towards these bills that are emancipating these kids at the age of 12, well, where do they go? Where do these trans kids, quote unquote trans 12-year-olds go? Do they go to a new foster home, a loving foster home? They don't, because we now have a law that is about to be enacted that says foster care parents must transition their kids if they want to get them.
Okay.
So these kids then go to group homes, unlocked. They're unlocked. These kids come and go as they please. And guess who hangs out at those group homes? Traffickers, drug traffickers, get them hooked on drugs and then sexually traffic these kids. And it's a pipeline. It's a pipeline for harming children.
Well, go ahead.
No, Jonathan, I'm just
I was just going to add, there are groups out there that's part of the MO is not just with California's laws, but they're encouraging kids. Like, hey, your parents don't agree, run away from home. Maybe you didn't even have your parents. Maybe you just think your parents aren't going to agree. Run away from home. Have a new glitter family. And it's so interesting. They kind of highlight this. The Attorney General tries to highlight this that foster youth or homeless youth are more likely to be. There's a disproportionate rate in trans. Well, it's the causation versus correlation here. I mean, when you have organizations telling kids run away from home, and we have these laws keeping secrets. I mean, that is the intent here. Is I see this is basically put a large wedge as much as you can between parents and their children as early as possible, and you're going to get these kind of results. And they're bad overall, all around for kids, no matter way you look at it. And so that's kind of what we're seeing.
So these initiatives, these bills, working with the legal structure to clean this up, to segregate it, to contain it as much as possible. It's a necessary step, but I mean, part of me just wants vengeance, like I want to hold these people accountable for what they're doing. And I don't know if that's possible, but and totally legally, not extra legally. I'm not saying anything like that, go punish her or anything like that. But like the people who are putting, like the Scott Wiener guy, like holding him accountable, are these lawmakers, are they just above ever being held accountable for their bad laws. Maybe they'll just get voted out. That's the only thing that could happen to them if they are a part of the destruction of all these lives and the tearing apart of all these families. Maybe vengeance is just not something that is even useful to even think of, but it just, once you start looking at this, I get a little angry at the people who are perpetuating this. But
yeah, I mean, see, I don't imagine anything ever happening to Scott Wiener other than maybe one day when we realize how bad this is, he might lose office. But even then, I wouldn't hold hope. But I would say that there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are pushing this, right? So Scott Wiener advances these bills, but he's not the one writing the bills. There are activists writing these bills, and hopefully, at least when it comes to some of the surgeries that are happening, there'll be fiscal, a lot of those who conducted the doctors who, there's different levels, right? You have someone who's detached and being, telling you, hey, in order to save kids' lives, we must allow these procedures, not really think about them. And then you have people who are actually conducting these procedures on kids, that are sterilizing them, that are just totally disfiguring, parts of their bodies at a really young age. Without really understanding the consequences, right? There's complications to many of these procedures where for the rest of their lives, they don't even get what they were promised, right? They're having to deal with medical problems afterwards. And so those folks who are there at that level, I do think there probably will be some accountability civilly for what they've done.
Yeah.
And I personally, having walked down this road, I want accountability. I want people to lose their careers. Those who know. There are a lot of people, like Jonathan said, that were indoctrinated themselves and really believe the trope that if you do not support the trans identity of a child, they will commit suicide. And so I give them a little latitude, but I don't give everyone latitude, because there are powers that be that know exactly what they're doing. They are profiting off of children. They are profiting off of mentally unwell people, and they're not going to get a pass from the parent perspective. And that's where the lawsuits come in.
Yeah.
And, and I kind of disagree a little bit with Jonathan. I think Scott Wiener is writing these bills. I think he is not the puppet, but he's the puppeteer. Sure, with a team of people behind him. People can actually go to my Substack, Our Duty, and you can see the number of bills that this man has authored or co-authored, and be a judge for yourself whether.
And there's a pattern in the bills that he's putting forth, right? Yes,
it's always against children and women. And it's as clear as day. He doesn't hide this. So
he definitely is an activist. I would say that, no legislature probably is the one writing their bills. They have a team that does it. And there's a group in particular called Equality California that is pushing a lot of this stuff. But Scott Wiener is definitely happy to champion and lobby. He's not a passive actor, that's for sure. He is an active part of this.
Yeah.
There's so much money. There's so much money in this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars. Human Rights Campaign brought in $78 million last year. That's up from $10 million a few years ago. What are they doing with that $78 million? Their objective years ago was to get same-sex marriage approved. They were successful. I voted for that. Then they shifted. And now they are all about trans advocacy. Glisten, GLAAD. They're bringing in gobs of money, millions and millions of dollars. And then they're getting fed more money because public schools are paying for them to come in. And it's this giant wheel of money passing hands. And those who are getting harmed are children and parents.
And I think there's kind of a point there, Erin, that when you bring up too, that's a big part of this is the part of the reason why it's been allowed to get as far as it is beyond the money is that they're hiding behind this shield of gay and lesbian rights. Right. right? They're trying to conflate that somehow, the struggle that's happening with teens and transgender teens and all of this stuff that we know is a social contagion. Somehow is something about taking away rights of gay and lesbians, and they're two separate issues, completely separate issues, but yet they have to tie them together as much as they can so that they can hide behind that shield, so to speak.
Yeah, and same with abortion, like kind of tying the medical side to abortion, so that they glom on to previous civil rights advances to advance this thing. So it's really, you really do have to disentangle it. It's like the whole anti-racist or like Trojan horse. It's like, wait, why would you not want to be on board with anti-racism? And then you look under, there's like, it's just racism, like just like different colors going on, So it's a really clever activist technique. What can people do? I guess they have to be in California to pitch in, right?
No,
what can people do? Oh.
You have to be in California to sign the petition. You have to be a registered voter, but anybody in the U.S. can contribute financially to help get these on the ballot. So, but yeah, so you can go to
How does financial, is this like, this is your big wheel of money lobbying making, isn't it? Like, just for the sake of transparency and so people understand what the money's being used for, like the money's probably for what? It's promotion. To get it on the bill, you need to have billboards, you need to have radio spots, right?
Well, I mean, that's for eventually that part, but this cost really is just the cost of getting the signatures, right? I mean, we're going to have, 550,000
people on the ground
signatures.
taking signatures.
I mean,
okay.
just if we had a completely volunteer basis where we didn't even have to pay for the petitions to be printed out, which we will. I mean, that's going to cost a lot of money. But just to say we had no administrative costs, like the website, all of the marketing, all of that other stuff to just get the word out. Say there's no cost there. I mean, just the verification of signatures to make sure that we can avoid some of the shenanigans that happened is going to be close to $1 million. So,
I never even thought of that. So there's a third party like company that goes through and verifies all these signatures. Like,
yeah, that's important. So there's been situations where if you're not careful with that, right, that it basically a lot of your signatures get thrown out, you get a lower percentage, and then they go to a full count and you don't really have a good understanding of how many you have. And then those are games that the state can play to kind of basically say you don't qualify. And so we want to avoid some of those games. So even just that aspect, right? I mean, we will have costs for petitions. We will have to have paid signature gatherers. We do have an additional administrative costs. The more people that are added to our mailing list, that goes up. It is going to be in the millions of dollars just from a cost. I'm not paid to do this. Erin's not paid to do this. We have a lot of volunteers. That enables us to have our costs down, but there's still professional people that we do have to pay to get it done. And so that's where the money goes to get these on the ballot. And so anybody in the United States can contribute to that cause. But in order to
get some dark money from China too. I mean, are you even just restraining it to?
Actually, we can't get dark money from China. You can't be a foreign national. No, and it's very transparent. So anything that's over $100 based off California campaign finance laws is disclosed, at least who it is. But it's unlimited donations. We could, someone in Texas can write us $1 million check. So, we definitely would accept that for sure. But yeah, so it's anywhere in the United States, no limits. You just have to be in the United States. Yep.
And it's really important for your listeners in other states that if we are successful in California, so goes the nation. I can't express that enough. We started this monstrosity in the United States, California. We were basically the birthplace of transgenderism. And we have been spreading it. And if we don't kill it here, it really doesn't matter if Kentucky is okay or Alabama is okay. Because remember, the kids can come here. They can get their one-way ticket and come to California and harm themselves. So we have to kill it in California. And once the Democratic Party sees that the bluest of blue states said, stop harming kids, get boys out of girls' sports, and stop keeping secrets from parents, the rest of the nation will follow suit. So really, this is a national ballot initiative.
Yeah. Yeah. And what is the, like, where do people go?
Yeah, so to learn more about the initiatives and to donate, you can go to protectkidsca.com. There's a donate button there. You can read the initiatives. You can look at the polling data, which shows that these would pass overwhelmingly in California if we can get them on the ballot. But the hard work is getting them on the ballot.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, so that's our focus for the next 6 to 8 months is that point. And again, you can follow our social media at Protect Kids CA, whether that's X, Facebook, or Instagram. But it's all protectkidsca.com.
And also people can sign up to be collectors of signatures. So
you can volunteers. Yeah, we have a sign up. So if you're in California, you can go to our website and sign up as well. And so that way we can contact you and keep you updated on the initiatives. And you can sign up if you're outside of California. I mean, you'll just, you can theoretically you can come across and you have to be a registered voter to collect signatures, but you can volunteer maybe at some other booths or whatnot. So
wow.
Yeah, and if everybody who is against removing a child's breasts at the age of 13 sent in $99, we'd be funded, and we would change the country.
Yeah. Important work. Yeah. What does it haunt you guys at night? Are you able to like put this down, read a book?
I try.
Yeah.
What? Did you see my desk?
Yeah, I see your desk.
No, I haven't stopped working for 2 years. I work 16-hour a day, 7 days a week, and this isn't my only unpaid job. I work with the detransitioners. I work with the parents who have their kids caught in this. I work across the nation getting witnesses for some of these bills and law firms and some of the big cases. A case that was just filed in Maryland. This is a compulsion now to save kids, because I'll tell you, my daughter could be one of these statistics, and I will never stop fighting for kids until this is over.
Yeah. Jonathan, are you a little bit more regulated than Erin?
Probably not. Maybe have an hour here or there. I'm able to decompress, but no. The thing is, timing is of the essence, right? And,
yes.
And so, if we knew that we were doing good work and it was just kind of like clockwork, we just got to put our time in and we'll eventually get there. It would have been a little bit easier. The problem is this is a battle. And one of those things that we're up against is time. And so, pretty much I have a full-time job, right? So this is all outside of that. And so, I work quite a bit. Every evening you're doing something relating to this, whether it's trying to, work with local politicians, whether it's trying to advance it through other policies relating to this, or it's just focused directly on these initiatives. Most of that extra time is going towards this. And so, this will be our lives for the next 6 to 8 months for sure, to make sure we get this on the ballot. And so as much as your listeners can contribute, whether it's just through volunteering or through financially, that will help us get there. And maybe we can get it done early so we can maybe enjoy a weekend at some point with their families before the end of the deadline's up.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time talking with people from a theoretical view about politics, and we kind of bemoan the state, the culture war, blah, 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 blah. There's like a lot of talk. So like engaging with you two, seeing what you're doing as engaged citizens, like even if you're skeptical as all get out about the system or about the possibility and stuff, you still believe in the human spirit. You're still putting yourself out there. You're still engaging with people. It's just really refreshing to see people who are actually standing up, going out there against all odds, whatever, just pushing yourself to the limit to get something done in the real world. So thank you. I'm glad to partake of your energy and to facilitate more people taking the stand and actually getting things out there, and stop just bemoaning something online, but actually donating their time, their money, their resources to actually change this particular issue. and actually like forestall kids ruining their lives before they even had a chance to start them, which is what's happening.
Yeah. And all those people sitting on the sidelines, just kind of watching, go to your computer right now, send in some money. You'll sleep better knowing that you're part of this. You're part of the change that you want to see. Sitting around talking about it doesn't move the needle. No one's coming in to save us. It's us. It's parents. It's concerned people. Send in some money, and you're going to be part of this. You can say, I was part of the change.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's wrap up the podcast. Thank you very much for setting this up, Erin, and it's great to meet you, Jonathan.
It was great to meet you, and thank you for having us.